And we're live. Well, we're not live, but I like to keep in the habit of saying we're live. Even when we're not live, this is the post-sprint report for the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. Roll intro. Thank you all for coming. This is, again, not live because I'm away and I don't trust the internet. I'm still in South Africa. I'm still in Cape Town. Last day in Cape Town. Got an exciting end of the trip coming up. I'm not sure when my post-race stream will be coming because of where I'll be. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But there's plenty to talk about. And you know what, actually, these sprint weekends, I feel like they do justify 2 streams because there's a lot going on. We've got 2 qualifying sessions to talk about. We've got 2 races to talk about. This one could end up being longer than the post-race. I guess we'll see, won't we? But thank you all for coming, wherever you are in the world. And of course, as always, make sure to check this out on audio-only platforms. If you like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your lugs-only content, give it a go, right? Because I upload these not live streams. Typically, I get it up earlier on Acast, so that actually they come first. So give it a go if you want. Right, anyway, not too much waffling in this one. We're going to crack through this because there's plenty to talk about, starting with sprint qualifying, which happened yesterday. Feels like an age ago. It was literally a day ago. And Lando Norris, pole position in the wet. Not without a bit of controversy, thanks to the stewards not knowing the rules. Shock. Lewis Hamilton P2, Fernando Alonso P3. Superb job from Fernando in the Aston Martin ahead of Max Verstappen down in P4. God, by Max's standards, that's a terrible result. Carlos Sainz P5, Sergio Perez P6, Leclerc 7, Piastri 8, Bottas P9, Joe P10, both Saubers into SQ3. Big. Sauber have definitely found something this weekend, whether it is upgrades. Obviously, I know Joe had a new front wing last race in Japan, and obviously that broke quite early on. Maybe this just works for their car. I know Hungary last year, wasn't it? Both the Saubers were rapid, just out of nowhere, just for vibes. George Russell P11 didn't even get into Q3, did George? Not so good. Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Ricardo Stroll, Gasly, Ocon, Albon, Tsunoda, Sargent P20 again. Look, obviously this one in the rain, it's always exciting. We got the rain kind of towards the end of SQ2. Meant George didn't have time to set a second lap at the end. Didn't have enough time to get out in the dry, and so he was gone. But that meant that SQ3 was really, really exciting. We were seeing the times fall. I mean, Piastri and Norris were close. Norris put his lap well over a second quicker of Hamilton in the end. It got deleted. There was a lot of confusion afterwards around why it got deleted. It shouldn't have got deleted. Turns out that whole, if you invalidate, and you know this, I know this from Forza days, right, when I used to play Forza all the time. If you invalidate towards the end of a lap, it will also invalidate your next lap. And that is true. That is the case at many tracks, but not all tracks. So a track like Austria, for example, that runoff, you can gain an advantage by going wide through that final corner, carrying more speed, which then gives you more speed to start your next lap and therefore gives you an unfair advantage. China, you've got gravel. So that is why this rule does not exist at China, but does at other tracks. You would think the stewards would know that and therefore not delete Lando's time and therefore cause all of this confusion post-race. But maybe that's too much to expect. At the end of the day, it was deleted, it was reinstated, the right decision was made in the end, and Lando deservedly got that pole position. What a lap. What a lap from the lad. Could he convert it? We'll get into that. Otherwise, who kind of stands out here? Obviously, yeah, I mean, both Saubers, you got to stand out. And as much as, you know, Joe's up there, Bottas was quicker than him in pretty much every session. Bottas very, 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 very impressive so far this weekend has been Valtteri. And once again, his luck didn't pay dividends, did it? He always seems to get unlucky, Valtteri. He's definitely taken, I think the results are clear to see. He's taken a step forward relative to Joe. You could argue, is that Joe stepping back? Is it Valtteri stepping forward? I think it's probably Valtteri stepping forward. Whenever it came to contract renewal season at Mercedes, he always seemed to find a little bit, didn't he, old Valtteri? And he knows he's got a lot to fight for to try and keep an Audi seat, because obviously Sainz has been linked with it, Hülkenberg's been linked with it as well. He could end up fully out of a seat. He needs to fight tooth and nail to put himself on the market. Maybe Bottas to Williams, because Sargent once again down in P20. But maybe Bottas put himself in the shop window enough to return back to Williams, where it all began for him, where it was so good at the early start, how he got his Mercedes seat because he was so impressive at that Williams team. But yeah, shout out Valtteri. And yeah, look, Fernando Alonso P3 in the Aston Martin, Stroll's down in P15. Stonking lap from Fernando, he's still got it. You know, the rainy conditions, look, it's not 100% driver, of course. You've got to fire up the tyres. If you can fire up the tyres quickly in these wet conditions, you will be rewarded exponentially so. Norris, Hamilton, I mean, the Brits in mixed conditions, it's just what we do, because it's miserable weather all the time out of nowhere, and then it's sunny and then it's just miserable. Although George didn't hold up his end of the bargain, did he? But yeah, it was sprint quali was a madness, and it led to a sprint race where Max took the win. But I'll tell you what, there was one hell of a... I think that's probably the best scrap of the season, isn't it? You had Sainz, you had Alonso, you had Leclerc waiting there, you had Perez, of course, who got the double overtaking at the end, and Norris. But let's get ahead of ourselves, because why was Norris back there in that scrap? Well, Lando. Oh, God, he's charted. Pole position, right? He's on pole. At the end of the day, around China, starting P2, you're on the inside of that really long-term one. Whenever you're on the outside of a corner like that, you are inherently more vulnerable. You're more at risk. You could say that if Lando had started P2, Lewis did get the better start for sure. Lando just, it was all or nothing. And could he have been a bit more passive in that moment? Let Lewis have the position, try and cut in and dive under, or just hold position P2. Lewis has got you off the start, take it, and live to fight another day. He didn't live to fight. Well, I mean, he finished P6, but like he could have. Look, hindsight, it's easy to say that, but I don't know. Would a more experienced Lando Norris have hung himself around the outside? The thing is, like, if that's against a car where you're like, right, this is my only opportunity to overtake the whole race. This is my only chance, right? I get that. I feel like Lando had more pace in his race car than Lewis, or at least could have made the move at another point, a more, conventional overtaking position. I mean, not that turn one isn't conventional, but he was being overtaken. It's easy to say in hindsight, but if Lando had conceded position and lived to fight another day, could he have won the sprint? No. Max was like 13 seconds clear by the end in a sprint race. Insane. But could he have finished second? I think he could have, but wasn't to be. And I mean, Lando's got plenty of seconds, so that wouldn't have changed his life that much. But it would have been good points for McLaren. They came away with what? That is 5 points for the team. It's 7 points for P2. He ended up with 3, did Lando. So, 4 more points on the board. It's not a crazy amount, right? But it would have made a difference. So that off the start, Max just bided his time, didn't he? Made his way through, overtook Alonso. Alonso didn't put up a fight at all. Hamilton kind of showed a little fight, but Lewis knew that move was getting done. As much as I watched that and be like, I wish Lewis had defended the inside more aggressively. He could have done that, but then Max would have just got the up and under and cut back on him. And, when there is that clear advantage in the hardware that Max is able to extract from that RB19, sometimes you've just got to play the long game. And, Lewis was quite comfortable P2 in the end. But, yeah, it was that battle for third, which obviously Perez came out on top of in the end, which was very exciting. Now, of course, Alonso did get a post-race penalty, didn't he? Which, Look, I think that him and Sainz, their battle was fair to a point. He got the punishment, the penalty. Did Fernando 10 seconds and 3 points on his super license when he chucked it back up the inside of 9. That was a very desperate lunge. I think Sainz had the move done. Alonso just chucked it in. Do I want to see that penalised? Do I think that was necessary to penalise him? Because he did cause damage to Carlos Sainz's car there. He also caused himself a puncture, hence why he finished P20. Do I think that merited a penalty? The thing is, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you don't want to dissuade drivers from racing hard. And ultimately, up to that point, before Alonso made that lunge, it was great. Like, Sainz was giving him just enough room. He was giving Sainz just enough room. But that lunge was... It was a reckless lunge. It caused that he drove into the side of Sainz. He was like... But because, if Sainz had got damage and Alonso had carried on and finished ahead of Sainz, am I looking at that and being like, it's probably a penalty? It's the kind of one where I think if both cars had kept going, I'd probably be like, just get him swap positions. Like, Alonso didn't retake that position fairly. Alonso obviously got a puncture, so then he fell back, so then the stewards, they're not left with much else to do. It's one of them that I fully get why he got punished, and I think he probably merited it, just because of the desperation of the move. But up until that point, it was vibes, and obviously Checo was the one who was able to capitalise, cut back. But then we got some more spice, didn't we? Because of course Leclerc was behind Sainz. Sainz had copped a bit of damage, and then the run down the long back straight. I mean, Sainz pushes Leclerc off the track. He just does. He just does. Leclerc is like well alongside, fully alongside. Sainz doesn't give him any room. I think afterwards Sainz was like, "Oh, I apologise if I overstepped the mark," which is as close as you're going to get to a racing driver being like, "My bad." And Leclerc was like, "Oh, yeah, we've had these before, and we'll kiss and make up, whatever." But yeah, that was a bit naughty from Carlos. But look, again, when drivers race hard, sometimes you're racing on the absolute limit, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to make errors, lapses, whatever, right? So I don't think there was any malice there in either of them. Fernando was desperate to hold on to the position. Sainz was desperate to hold on in front of Charles Leclerc. Sainz is not going to be a Ferrari driver next year. His loyalty is not really... It's to himself more than ever. I mean, drivers are always loyal to themselves. Right? They're always going to be selfish, but like more than ever, Sainz he's got to be loyal to himself. So yeah, a little bit naughty from Sainz, but I'm glad he held on to P5 in the end. Norris, Piastri, P6 and 7. Russell, soft tyres for him, P8. Joe, P9, no point on the board. Him and Valtteri had a bit of contact as well, didn't they? It's difficult. You look at the onboard from, I think it was Russell's point of view, you could see Joe was on the outside, kind of he's taking a very wide line and then kind of cuts into the corner, and Bottas is there, and Bottas loses his front wing end plate, which then results in him finishing 12th, where he probably would have finished higher. I mean, those Saubers feel like they're quicker than Ricciardo's, let's call it an AlphaTauri there, a Racing Bull, and Magnussen's Haas. That Sauber does seem to be the 6th quickest car this weekend, hence why Bottas was 12th, because he's been quicker than Joe all weekend. So yeah, that was a shame for Bottas, and a shame for Joe that he didn't get a point finishing P9. It's a great finish. And Ocon 13. Ocon's been doing well. Stroll 14, not very good. Gasly, Tsunoda, Albon, Sargent, Hulkenberg, I think he copped damage as well. So that's why he finished so low in the sprint race. But all in all, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very exciting sprint race, considering the winner won by 13 seconds. And there was no real battle for Max going through the field. But that's just kind of the way it is in the sport at the minute. But I think that, yeah, all in all, pretty good. Pretty happy. So how did that leave the Drivers' Championship? Well, as it stands, Drivers' Championship, no one's changed position, okay? I'll just save you the just points, okay? Max now extends his lead to 15 points ahead of Checo with 70, 85 to 70. Leclerc, Sainz, they stay the same. Norris, Piastri. Russell managed a point, so he goes ahead of Sainz, but he's already ahead of Sainz because of best finishing position. Hamilton was the biggest gainer for sure, went from 10 to 17 points from the sprint, biggest relative gain anyway. And team standings don't change either. Everyone's still in place. 155 Red Bull, 129 Ferrari, 74 Mercedes, 42 Merc, and 33 Aston Martin. No one else scored a point. Racing Bull stands 7, Haas stay on 4. But, you know, Sauber's sitting P9. Don't really tell the full, because they seem to be quicker than Williams at the minute for sure. Even look at the driver standings. I mean, Bottas is 20th, but he's been driving better than Joe most of this season. That gap does seem to have opened up, which is obviously hilarious timing with my video about Joe being the perfect second driver for Audi. But even Total Wolf was literally like, Mercedes sell 50% of their cars in China. That's crazy. That is a crazy number. But Joe needs to, like, commercially, Joe is perfect. But performances, I mean, 11th in Bahrain, 7th in the sprint. There's been these moments, but Valtteri is just quicker than him right now. He really is, and he hasn't been the whole time, but he is now. Pull it out, Joe, come on. Because the vibes have been good this weekend in China. The fans have really, they were gassed when he got to SQ3, for sure. And yeah, I think the fan base, you say that a lot of fan bases, right? It's nice seeing a driver that the Chinese fan base can really get behind and really support, you know. So driver standings are that, team standings are that, then qualifying. So we've had the sprint's done now. We can completely, it's going to be interesting to see, and I feel like already, in my opinion, I think this is a better sprint format. I think it's improved. Oh, and before as well, before we get on, let me just remind you that, you know, the amount of people are like, oh, no one's going to fight for places in the sprint. No one's going to care. The drivers aren't going to. We've had the best battle. We've had the best multi-car battle, right? With Alonso, Sainz, Perez, and then Leclerc, Sainz after. At least one of, maybe the best, right? Battle of the season so far. In a sprint race. Come on. These drivers, it's not in their nature to not push, okay? But yes, qualifying result, dry qualifying session, no rain this time to mix things up, which means, of course, Max Verstappen puts it on pole pretty comfortably in the end. He was about 0.3 clear of Checo, which is, yeah, qualifying-wise, I think Checo once again, okay, he's done what he needs to do. This is what Red Bull will want. This is what Christian Horner will want. If he can be 2 to 3 tenths off of Max, and we'll look at the head-to-heads in a minute, that's about right. So him getting P2 this weekend is exactly what Checo needs. More of this, please, Sergio. Fernando P3 again, ahead of both McLaren, both Ferrari. Fernando Alonso is, I mean, if it wasn't for that lunge, man, because I do think it was a desperate lunge, and he did damage Sainz's car, but he's been quick this weekend. He's having one hell of a weekend, is Fernando Alonso. Ahead of both McLaren's, Norris, Piastri, 4 and 5. Leclerc, Sainz, 6 and 7. I was surprised. I was expecting more from Ferrari this weekend. Definitely quicker one-lap pace than McLaren, but we'll see long-run race pace if the Ferraris can make their way through. Typically, they're a bit of a faster racing car than the McLaren. I wasn't expecting much from McLaren at all this weekend. So they've made a step up for sure. Russell P8, Hulkenberg 9, Bottas into Q3 again. Q3 both times, SQ3 and Q3 for Valtteri Bottas. Very, very, very good. Yeah, because Magnussen made SQ3, didn't he? But Hulkenberg this time. And yeah, role reversal for the Mercedes. Well, not quite as... Russell didn't get it in Q1, Hamilton did. But yeah, Russell gets to Q3. Well done, George. Stroll 11, Ricciardo 12, Ocon 13, Albon 14, Gasly 15. Ricciardo quicker than Tsunoda all weekend so far as well, by the way, which Daniel needed. Yuki seemed really confused after finishing P19, even though there's a cross on this graphic, but we'll ignore that. There's always a mistake in these streams, live streams. It's a stream. whatever. Yeah, Tsunoda did his lap and was like, it felt good, but I'm 19th, so I don't know. That's a bit concerning. There's similar noises to what Ricciardo's been making recently as well. So Ricciardo's got a new chassis. Maybe that helped in some way, shape or form. But yeah, Hamilton down in P18. He was like, which again, another change with the new sprint weekend order is that you can change your car between the sprint race and qualifying. Lewis did significantly change his car, according to him, and he went from qualifying second to 18th. So this isn't the first time that Lewis has made big changes to the car and it's really affected the performance. I don't know. He's Lewis Hamilton. He's a 7-time world champion. Who am I to argue with his approach? But at the end of the day, this is not the first time it's happened, and it's not the first time that he's got bitten badly for getting a bit too out there with his setups. I don't know. At the end of the day, he qualified 18th. He made a mistake as well, going into that hairpin just before the end of the lap. Locked up, went wide, probably lost the 4 tenths he needed to get through. It's interesting as well because you look at these sessions, right? I mean, like SQ1, Joe only just squeezed through. He was P15. He was the one, and then he managed to get to SQ3. And then in qualifying, Checo in Q1 was 15th. If Hamilton hadn't bottled his lap, Checo would have been out in Q1. Yeah, he got through, got into Q3, and qualified second. It is like drivers can get caught out, go out in a much earlier session than their pace actually determines, because clearly Checo had good pace this weekend. It was fairly 2-3 tenths off of Max. But he almost went out in Q1, and it's fine margins. That would have been a big stinker. But he lived to fight another day, and that's how qualifying finished ahead of the Grand Prix tomorrow. Let's have a little look at the head-to-heads then. Been keeping an eye on this on Twitter. I would have included the sprint qualifying, but with these gaps, these average gaps, putting a rain session in is just going to skew the numbers. So I've decided I will include sprint qualifyings throughout the season when they're dry, and I will exclude normal qualifying sessions when they're wet, because that's not, that they should be compared separately to this. This is just about qualifying. One lap, qualifying slick tyre pace in the best session that both drivers reach. So for example, for this one, Alonso got to Q3, Stroll went out in Q2, so I'm only comparing the Q2 times where Alonso was about, I think, 0.186 ahead of Stroll, so that's the gap. So yeah, we've had, obviously, Albon, Sargent, Bottas, Joe, they both have won fewer sessions. Joe crashed in Saudi, so they couldn't set a lap time in qualifying. I know some people would be like, oh, it should be 5-0, but I'm doing this to compare the actual deltas in terms of pace. So it's funny, actually, the 2 5-0s, so Verstappen, Perez, Ocon, Gasly, still both within 3 tenths. So Verstappen, Perez, that gap is averaged at 0.288, which is, I think that's kind of perfect from Red Bull's point of view. That's exactly what they want from Checo. Just within 3 tenths is spot on for them. And then Ocon, Gasly, it's 0.214, even though Gasly went quicker than Ocon in sprint quali. But obviously I'm not including that because of the rain, so a bit unlucky there for Gasly. But that gap's not, 0.214 is not a huge quali delta, and Gasly can overturn that delta for sure. It's just that Ocon's always just had that little bit on Gasly this year, which is weird. I wasn't expecting that at all. I was expecting it to be, the thing is, it has been close, and that's why just looking at 5-0 makes, 5-0 tells one story, but then the 0.214 tells another, right? And I think the number is the story that actually is more meaningful if we're actually going to try and pull meaningful insight. Because then you look at Albon, Sargent, that is a whitewash at the moment, 4-0 to Albon, but that gap's 0.486, so almost half a second, which is about the same as it's been last year. Logan. How I've put my neck on the line for you, mate, and it's just not going well, is it? Bottas Joe as well, 0.380, came down a little bit, that average, but It's still not good, especially considering the first Grand Prix of the year, Bahrain, that gap was basically, it was like 1/1000th advantage Bottas, literally 1/1000th. Yet in the next three, Bottas has slapped him. So Joe's got to find something. It's not been good enough. And then, there's 5 pairings on 4-1. So Alonso Stroll is the biggest gap, 4-1, 0.32 seconds. Average advantage Alonso, of course, 4-1 head-to-head between the two of them. Then it's Hülkenberg Magnussen, 4-1, 0.237. So Hülkenberg's got the advantage. Not as big, feels like, as last year, but still an advantage baked in of at least a couple of tenths. And then obviously Ricciardo's been quicker than Tsunoda this weekend, and that's dragged their average gap right down to 0.218, which is still significant. I mean, Tsunoda's it's 4-1 at the end of the day, still to Tsunoda. But I said this in my video, right? Tsunoda's been consistently quicker than Ricciardo up until this weekend, before this weekend. But it's not been a crazy gap. And a couple of good qualities from Ricciardo will bring that average gap right down, for sure. Then Russell Hamilton, 4-1. 0.135, Norris, Piastri 4-1, 0.132 advantage Norris. So yeah, again, Russell, the Mercedes pair, the McLaren pair, it's almost just a tenth, so there's very, very little in it. Been impressed with Piastri actually qualifying pace. He's definitely catching up to Lando, slowly but surely. But the closest, of course, by a significant margin, is Sainz and Leclerc. 2-2 now. Sainz has a 0.06 of a second, 60,000ths of a second advantage on average over Charles Leclerc. But it's basically neck and neck, isn't it? So, Leclerc struggling on tyre prep at the start of the season in that Ferrari, but he's getting there. But Sainz obviously needs to be driving out of his skin to prove a point, right? And to get himself a good seat, which, it feels like with all the talk, it feels like probably it's going to be Antonelli Mercedes, doesn't it? Sainz to Audi. Perez, if he keeps doing what he's doing, I think he should stay. I think Red Bull, I think if he keeps doing what he's doing, it will be a significant jump up from last season. And I think Ricciardo could find himself out of a seat, but he needs to... a lot can change, and Ricciardo needs to keep on doing what he's done this weekend, which is convincingly be quicker than Tsunoda. Because is it too little too late? Maybe. But yeah, they're the qualifying head-to-heads. Team by team, Alpine, already kind of talked about them. Ocon does have the upgrade this weekend, so he's got a slightly lighter chassis, better floor, so that will certainly account for some of the advantage he has. He should be ahead of Gasly. He is ahead of Gasly. To what amount that is because of the upgrade, it's impossible to say. There's not got much more to say on that. Aston Martin, again, Alonso doing absolute bits in a car that Lance is getting pretty average, below average performances out of, unfortunately. But I've said this before, I think him sticking with Aston long term is the right move for him. It's the right move for old Fernando. So, I hope he gets a podium. I'd love to see him on the podium this weekend in China. He's good round here. He's got a good record. He won in 2005, didn't he? In his Renault. And 2012, I think, at Ferrari, he won around Shanghai. So, big up, Fernando. Well done. Ferrari, obviously a bit disappointing one at pace, but we'll see. We'll see in race pace wise how they do. A little bit feisty between the two drivers, maybe somewhat. Look, Carlos has got to just drive for himself at the end of the day. He I don't begrudge him for getting a bit elbows out with Leclerc. It was a bit naughty, but he's the one out of a drive next year, and he's the one who maybe could get a Mercedes seat. I think he should get a Mercedes seat. I think Toto would be... who's he worried about losing Kimi Antonelli to? I don't know. I get you got burnt not getting Verstappen all that time ago, but I feel like Daimler Mercedes could lock down. Like, Piastri walked away from Alpine, but that's Alpine. I know they're Renault, but it's Renault. Mercedes, come on, I don't know. Whatever. He definitely deserves a top seat in F1, that is no doubt, and Sauber can't give that to him. Maybe Audi will. Risky. Not much to say on Haas. Hülkenberg, good drive in Quali. Magnussen, top 10 in the sprint. They're definitely not the worst car anymore, that's for sure. Not much more to say on that. McLaren better than I thought this weekend already. Again, Lando putting well over a second on everyone. I think 2 seconds he put on Max, and like 1.3 I think it was on Lewis. Come on, that is an unreal lap from Lando. And it's a shame that all of this, people kind of misunderstanding why his lap got reinstated. You know, he clearly didn't gain an advantage, but that's besides the point. The rule at China is that you don't invalidate by invalidating the lap prior. That's just the rule at China. That is the written rule, and the stewards and the FIA should have known that, so to not delete the lap to then cause the confusion. Because you can rightly argue that, all right, well, with that lap deleted, maybe Lewis could have pushed a bit harder. I'm sure he was just in the zone going for it, right? The team weren't saying to Lewis, oh, by the way, Lando deleted his lap, you can slow down, we've got pole. But it opens up that potential that a driver would be like, okay, yours is deleted, I can just chill now. But I guess teams know better than that. They should just push regardless. But yeah, I mean, what a lap from Lando Norris. This kid's unreal. That win's coming. It will come. It will definitely come. Just a matter of time. Where Max is in the place he is right now, for anyone to get a win who isn't Max Verstappen needs some craziness to go on, something to happen. Max's car to break, allowed Sainz to win. You know, otherwise it's just not going to happen. Mercedes, yeah, I mean, up and down. I don't know. I'm just a bit sick of hearing the same thing from that team. Just, you know, one week they're there, next week they're going out in Q1. You know, I don't know. It just feels like there's not that consistency at all. You know, it's like both drivers, one of them will go out in Q1 or one of them will go out in Q2 and one of them will have problems, the other one won't. It's just like, just pull your fingers out. Like, a team with this experience, you don't expect such inconsistent. Even like last year, there was no point at which the Mercedes was the second quickest car for any consistent period. The Aston was quickest at the start, second quickest at the start. McLaren, second quickest in the middle. Ferrari, second quickest at the end. Mercedes were just occasionally, like Cota, they were flying. They were comfortably second quickest. And it just dotted around the year. Not good enough. Racing Bulls again. Look, Ricciardo's been all over Tsunoda this weekend, which is exactly what Ricciardo needs to prove any doubt, because the first 4 Grand Prix just weren't good enough from him relative to Yuki. Yuki seems concerned, like he went out in Q1 P19. It's not that Ricciardo just beat Yuki, it's that Yuki is lower than he has been for most of the season, which does imply to me that there is some kind of issue on his front. I mean, Ricciardo got a new chassis and it seems to have helped. Tsunoda, he's allowed an off weekend as Yuki, okay, and this feels like quite an off weekend so far for him. Red Bull, business as usual, rapid, 13 seconds in the sprint race to P2. 1-2 in qualifying. Come on. These lot are on smoke, no question. Not much more to say, really. Sauber, big step up this weekend, very promising, very good. Exactly what both drivers need now. Hopefully this continues, because both drivers desperately need to put big performances in to put themselves in the shop window. This has been a very good weekend from Valtteri Bottas so far, and he's been quicker than Joe all year so far this year. So he's got a chance. Joe has to do more. He got 9th in the sprint, which is pretty good, but pace-wise, Valtteri is quicker. There is no question now. I don't know. I don't know where those two necessarily fit in at other teams. You know, I think that if Joe can start matching Valtteri for the rest of the season, and they can give them a good car so that they can both start flirting with the points most weekends, you know, it works for Audi in so many ways, but Sainz and Hulkenberg, there's so much there's so much noise. I don't think, like, you got to think for Audi, when they come in, they're going to want like at least one marquee driver, aren't they? I don't think that's Bottas or Joe, but I think Bottas maybe to a Williams, that could be really shrewd from James Vowles, bringing back. Because, I mean, we'll talk Williams now. Like, Sargent again, man. Like, this is now coming to a point where he's had a whole season and a bit, and he's still making these, he's spun in qualifying, he's still making these mistakes. Behrman came in, didn't put a foot wrong. Lawson came in for 5 races, didn't really put a foot wrong. Yet, Sargent doesn't have enough feet. They just keep going wrong. Like, it is now coming to a point where I'm just like, you know what, maybe this kid just doesn't have it. And I've given Sargent a lot of time, and I think you should, you know, I think we should give benefit of the doubt. You know, I've been reluctant to jump on and be super critical of Sargent and Joe as 2 examples, but I think it comes to a point where you're like, you know what, like, Joe's been in the seat for longer than Sargent, and Valtteri's now starting to open up this concerningly large gap to him, which wasn't the case at the start of their time together. And it's like, Joe, you need to show more than this. But I think Sargent, like, a lot of my belief in Logan has come from his junior career and what he's done before. But now it's like we're a season and a bit in, and you're still making these mistakes, and you've still got massive gaps. I mean, the gap to Alex in qualifying, because of his spin, he couldn't put another lap in, was almost a whole second. That's dragged his average right up to almost half a second. It's not good enough. He needs to find something very, very quickly. Otherwise, there's 0 chance he's keeping that seat for next year. I mean, Williams need a bit of money. Would putting Joe alongside Albon get Williams a bit of cash and be an upgrade on Sargent? Yes to both. Would Bottas be a bigger upgrade on track than Joe, but obviously a less attractive option commercially for Williams? Yes. See if Albon stays. Williams feel a bit out of sorts, didn't they? Obviously lacking on parts, but also performance on track hasn't been great this weekend. And, you know, it feels like Haas have jumped them. It feels like Sauber have jumped them now. 2 teams you would have said were behind Williams pace-wise last year. So concerning times for Williams, definitely. Just hope long-term it pays off, because that's the whole reason they did this, right? But yeah, okay. I think we're done. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching wherever you are in the world. Again, I'm not sure when the post-race Chinwag for the actual race is going to be coming, so I'll get to that when I can. It might be on Tuesday, it might be later in the week, whatever. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to like the video if you're watching this on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. Check your subscribe. You might think you are, but you might not be. If you're listening audio only, drop a rating, leave a nice comment. Tell me how. Do you like my... Oh, actually, if you're audio only, you can't see my beard. I'm grabbing my beard. Hannah likes the beard. I'm not sure about the beard, because I forgot to bring my razor, so I've just done my neck. Hannah likes the beard. She's doing like animal poses. She's copying the elephants in the back. But yeah, thank you for watching wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you next time. Enjoy the race, and ciao, adios, I'm done. Goodbye.